week, with temperatures at or below average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
There are High Court challenges, there are protests, and it's happening all over the country as local people object to the number of people being put in local hotels. And as they cross the English Channel in ever larger numbers, the problem doesn't go away. We'll discuss the latest on the Hugh Edwards story with Jim Davidson, a man who knows what it's like to be called guilty before he proved his innocence. And we'll talk about China. Can you believe we're still giving them 50 million quid a year in foreign aid? You couldn't make it up. But first, let's get the news with Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Nigel. The Prime Minister has set out pay increases for millions of public sector workers. Police and prison officers will receive an increase of 7%, while teachers will get 6.5%. Teachers' unions say the new pay recommendations will allow them to call off strike action. Rishi Sunak warns there will be no more negotiating. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has ruled out increasing taxes or borrowing to fund the pay rises.
We want to pay them fairly, which is why we've taken the decision to accept the independent pay review body recommendations. But at the same time, the reason that many of them are angry, the reason that we've had strikes, is because they've seen their take-home pay eroded by inflation. And it's vital that we don't do anything in accepting these awards that fuels inflation and means we're having the same disputes this time next year.
Well, junior doctors will continue striking tomorrow as the 6% offer to the British Medical Association falls well below the 35% rise the union is calling for. It's part of a 5-day of walkouts in what's being described as the longest in the history of the NHS. In other news this evening, the government has been given the go-ahead to take a legal battle over its Rwanda deportation policy to the Supreme Court. The Prime Minister had said he fundamentally disagreed with the Court of Appeal's ruling the deal was unlawful. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has been battling to get the policy off the ground after it was previously blocked by appeal judges. Mental health charity Mind says people like Hugh Edwards experiencing serious mental health problems should be given the space to receive treatment. Questions have been raised regarding the Sun newspaper's conduct, as well as the BBC's response to the allegations that Mr Edwards paid a young person for sexually explicit images. The corporation's Director General will be questioned in Parliament next week on how the story was handled. The Met Police has found no evidence of criminality. And the coronation robes worn by the King and the Queen will be featured as part of the summer display at Buckingham Palace. King Charles and Queen Camilla have already viewed the exhibition ahead of the official opening tomorrow. The public will have the opportunity to see the robes up close in the Palace Ballroom, where secret rehearsals for the royal family were held ahead of the big day. Well, the special event will last until September. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Nigel.
Good evening. There are over 50,000 people who've crossed the English Channel staying in hotels all over this country. There are a further 5,000 empty rooms that are booked already with the Home Office waiting for the next wave to cross the English Channel. And people, understandably, are saying, why on earth are we spending £6 or £7 million a day on this? And so the government has sought alternatives, barges, former military sites, but no one's happy about that. And all over the country, there are a variety of protests and legal actions and questions to councils going on. Just the other night, we showed you in Surbiton, local residents talking about a hotel there. That particular one, was full of people who'd come from Afghanistan and not directly across the English Channel. But there is no doubt about it, the pressure is becoming absolutely enormous. And I wonder, given the sheer number of these challenges, legal challenges, protests, I wonder, have we now had enough? Tell me what you think. Farage at gbnews.com. Now, one of these that I followed is, of course, RAF Scampton. I've been up there a couple of times. I've been to the Great Dam Busters pub just down the road. Of course, the site of the historic Dam Busters raid. And to think that not only will that place stop being used for aviation, but a proposal that could have been worth as much as £300 million to the local economy has been shelved. Many of the World War II artefacts, including many personal items of Guy Gibson VC, have been cleared out of the rooms as they make way for 2,000 young men to move in. And it's met with huge objections locally. And the local council, West Lindsey District Council, are expecting a decision that will come from the High Court tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to see whether they can move on and push for a judicial review. I have to say, I believe what's happening to Scampton is not only total cultural desecration, but robbing and depriving the area of perhaps some really good opportunities. Now, GB News reporter Will Hollis is there right now outside the gates of RAF Scampton. Will, please bring us up to speed with the local mood.
Yes, well, it's around 158 miles south that the High Court decision is going to be made, but ultimately this is the place that it's affecting. If you came here a few hours ago, Nigel, you would have seen a load of people that have been outside protesting. They've been protesting ever since the decision was made in March. Now, what's been happening today at the High Court is essentially a permissions hearing. It's a stepping stone, a penultimate stepping stone on towards the judicial review. West Lindsey District Council, which represents RAF Scampton, and Braintree District Council, which represents RAF Wethersfield, they're locked in this legal battle. And tomorrow the decision will be made on if they can go to the bigger judicial review, where there'll be that full investigation into whether the government has acted lawfully in their plans to house asylum seekers at places like Scampton. Councillor Roger Patterson, you're the Scampton councillor. Thanks for talking to GB News tonight. How are you feeling right now on the eve of this big decision? Is it going to be a sleepless night for you?
No, it'll be. I'll get a good night's sleep. I'm confident. I've always been confident. I think we've got the right plans. Our case is lawful. The Home Office has acted unlawfully in what they're trying to do, overlooking a £300 million investment deal, ignoring planning rules. Planning policies have just been renewed, so they're absolutely crystal clear what can and can't happen at RAF Scampton. It doesn't include anybody else coming in other than Scampton Holdings and their development. So I'm confident that we're going to win this and get through to the judicial review. Well, we've got a fantastic team of officers and our legal people. And so, yeah, I'll sleep well tonight in the hope that we'll get the right outcome tomorrow morning.
And then just describe for me that £300 million investment. What will it mean for Scampton, which is a small part here around the camp, but also for Lincoln and the wider Lincolnshire area?
It's probably the time I've been up here, it's probably the biggest deal that we've ever had in Lincolnshire. It's certainly in my memory anyway. It will make a huge difference. Tourism, jobs, growth, education facilities coming here, space, you name it, it would be massive for us. We're sitting in a corridor where we've got the Bomber Command Memorial up the road. Next door up the road is RAF Ingham, the Polish bomber base during World War II, and it's got Poland's National Bomber Memorial there. And Scampton sits right in the middle of these on a heritage. Would it be on a heritage trail? So there's plenty to bring people in, enthusiasts, tourists, to come and see what we've got and learn about our history of the whole area. This would be massive for us. Best thing that's ever happened to central Lincolnshire in this area for, well, it probably years and years, if not ever.
And then if you wake up tomorrow, you get to 11 o'clock, and then just very quickly that decision doesn't go your way and it's refused, what happens next?
Well, we fight on. They've got to April before they have to go for planning permission. And we believe that they're going to try to skirt around it and not come for local democracy. I believe they don't believe in local democracy.
So it wouldn't be the end if you don't get the decision you want tomorrow?
No, I believe that they go to the Secretary of State. But again, our Central Lincolnshire Local Plan, Section 75 and all the other, is absolutely rock solid. And if the Secretary of State or whoever deals with it goes by the book and goes by the planning rules, he's going to have to refuse them.
Councillor Patterson from West Lindsey District Council, I hope you get a good night's sleep tonight. Of course, asylum seekers won't be arriving at Scampton for another month or so, but Nigel, you would have seen that yesterday they did start arriving at RAF Wethersfield in Essex.
They did, Will. Thank you very much indeed, and good luck to Councillor Patterson. I have to say, I think those prospects for the complete regeneration of that site are very, very exciting for the people of Lincolnshire. If it's turned into a migrant centre, all that will be gone. Now, changing gear, the story that's dominated everything this week, of course, is the Hugh Edwards story. But for the first few days, even though his name was all over the internet, plus one or two pictures, we weren't allowed to say it. Was that right? Was it wrong? Joining me is Jim Davidson, comedian, former host of the Generation Game, and of course now running a very successful Ustream channel. Jim joins me from Torquay. Jim, you went through all of this, didn't you? You were arrested, you went through murder, and there was a presumption that you were guilty, and you had to prove your innocence. In the light of that, wasn't it right earlier in this week that Edwards wasn't named.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think he wasn't named because the various people in the media were frightened to name someone because they were actually getting this story out there before all the facts were there. It's a sad story, Nigel. It's very sad. And I don't think we know the half of it. I mean, if you look online, everyone is now an expert, apart from all the jokes that's going around. But everyone has an idea. Is it a girl? Is it a boy? What did he do? But the fact is now that the police have said he did not break the law, and now he is in a mental institution and will be suffering probably terrible shame. And yes, mental illness. I went through this for a year. I was arrested, but never charged. And I always remember these words as I was walked to the police station. It was still scary. This policeman said, "Don't worry, Jim. Yours is not underage sex. Yours was just a bunch of old slappers." And I thought, oh, well, fair enough. It's taken the pain away a bit. But the pain does not go. It's not knowing what other people are doing. You watch, Nigel. I'm down here in Torquay. I've got fish and chips today, and I threw a bit on the floor that wasn't very nice. And 1 million seagulls turned up and devoured it. That's what's going to happen now. Everyone's going to want a bit of this story for their own reasons.
Jim, tell us, did it really have a bad effect on you?
Well, actually, I wrote a book about it, and because Cliff Richard and everyone said we're going to sue the police, we're going to do this, and Paul Gambaccini was very upset, and I didn't think the police behaved badly for me because at the end there was no further action, and I was never ever charged. But I wouldn't want to go through it again. It's slightly different now. I mean, I was accused of breaking the law. He's not been accused of breaking the law, but it's just the accusation, I think, that's done the damage. And at the end of the day, the Sun newspaper, which I quite love, I think it's great fun. And I saw Neil Wallace with you last night. Yeah. They'll just wring their hands and wait for the next little tidbit, and they won't care. They'll put that story away and they'll get on with the next one. It's a bit much when the Sun are the moral guardians of our country, Nigel.
I know, but Jim, be honest about it. Anybody in the public eye, hasn't it always been a bit like that?
Yes, I think it is. Me and my lawyer, Henry Bramman, used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go and get the newspapers to find if I could go home to the current wife. I mean, it was crazy. But you would think that Mr. Edwards, who I don't know, it's going to be more current wives as well going. I think you've got to watch yourself. Everyone's a reporter. Everyone's a conspiracy. What if it's true? And I say if with a capital I. If these stories are true, then he was foolish. He has made a mistake. It seems to me, and we don't know if it's a man or a girl, but I'm assuming that it's a male that he was dealing with. Then this is a gentleman that's living not a double life. No, but this is someone that can't control the urges inside this man. That's the mistake. And I don't think he should be bashed up for that. There is a little bit of homophobia, I think, sneaking into all this stuff. And I just think it's sad. It's sad for his wife. I mean, she's been ridiculed now, and it's just so sad.
No, I mean, Jim, we don't know the full facts of this.
Not being charged. The kid said he didn't do it, and the Sun print it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the full facts. But a final thought on how have the BBC handled all of this?
Well, I'm not sure how the BBC I don't understand why the BBC have to be involved. If it was a dustman that was doing it, would you phone up the corporation and say, "Oh, Bert the dustman's been sending pictures of his Azure fathers to my boy"? I really don't know. I think the BBC,
come on. You know,
is
Hugh Edwards
between the rock and a hard place.
Hugh Edwards, he's been the modern day Dimbleby, hasn't he? The face of the BBC, the announcement of the Queen's death, the coronation. He is a public figure. That's the difference, isn't it?
Well, it is, and people say that he's paid. He is paid through public money. Well, I don't buy that, really. He gets paid for the job he did, and as you know, Nigel, he was very good at what he did. Yeah. And now the allegation is the money that went to this young person, has been spent on drugs. Well, how would Hugh Edwards, if he did, in fact, give this money, how would he know on control what that money was spent on? I mean, it's crazy. It's a witch hunt, and we've had enough of this now, I think.
All right. Jim Davison, clear As ever, enjoy yourself in Torquay. See you very soon. Thank you. In a moment, a story that I hope is all over the front pages, literally of every single newspaper tomorrow. It is that important. I doubt it will be, but it's all about China. Not just that we're going on giving them large amounts of foreign aid, but a committee report in the House of Commons released this morning telling us they pose an existential threat to our liberal democracy. All of that in just a couple of minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Let's talk China. It matters. Quite extraordinary to think that last year we gave China £50 million in foreign aid. Oh, it's OK, we're told, because that's down from 80 million quid the year before. We shouldn't be giving them a single bean. And I think you'll agree with that in just one moment, because a report today issued by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee has said the following. Without swift and decisive action, we are on a trajectory for the nightmare scenario where China steals blueprints, sets standards and builds products, exerting political and economic influence at every step. Such prevalence in every part of the supply chain will mean that, in the export of its goods or services, China will have a pliable vehicle through which it can also export its values. This presents a serious commercial challenge, but also has the potential to pose an existential threat to liberal democratic systems. Have a think about that, folks. An existential threat to liberal democratic systems. And it runs through business, and it runs through our universities, and it's real, and yet so few people in Parliament dare speak out. I have to say, I thought the wording that was put out by this ISC committee was very fundamental. It's why I said earlier, before the break, this needs to be on the front page of every national newspaper tomorrow. Luke de Pulford joins me. He is Executive Director of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Luke, I mean, this report did not mince its words.
It didn't. It set out pretty clearly that in every area of UK national life, our critical infrastructure, our universities, our investment screening rules, in terms of Chinese overseas espionage through the United Front Work Department, the UK does not have a plan. It isn't so much that we've been asleep at the wheel, it's that we've blindfolded ourselves, got on the back seat and given the keys of the car to China. We have no plan and no strategy to address what we see as, or we're supposed to see, as our greatest strategic threat today, and it's deeply disconcerting.
Universities, Cambridge colleges in particular, something called the Confucius Programme, which I want you to explain very briefly to people. Tell us about Confucius and universities.
So Confucius Institutes were founded as a way of trying to increase knowledge of China, language exchange, that sort of thing. They find themselves associated with particular universities. And sadly, they've over time become too associated with various organs of the Chinese state, including Chinese embassies. They've become hotbeds of intellectual property theft, of intimidation, of Hong Kongers and others, for example, in the UK. And very worryingly, we haven't really had a plan to deal with that. We did have the UK government say at one time we were going to close them all, like the US has and like other countries have. But then we U-turned on that and said we wouldn't do that after all.
And of course, Rishi Sunak, when he was running to be leader of the... He didn't win, but he became PM later. He was talking very tough about these institutes, wasn't he? He's U-turned completely.
He was. In fact, it was one of his major campaign promises. He said China was a threat, and he said that he was going to close Confucius Institutes, I believe, on day one of his premiership. Well, he didn't do that, quite the opposite. He's U-turned on it, and in fact, we found ourselves in a much more friendly posture, diplomatically, towards China, which is, as this report rightly says today, imperiling us.
So, they're infiltrating our universities and corrupting them. They are spying on our industry. They are posing an increasing military threat. They have absolutely fundamentally broken all the promises over Hong Kong. And I mean literally every single promise over Hong Kong. And yet, we don't speak out. And I'm going to put it to you that that is because there are so many people, retired civil servants, retired senior businessmen, politicians, who frankly are in the pay of China. We have been corrupted by Chinese money.
Well, there's a very interesting part of the report that came out today, which identifies certain individuals who came out of government and ended up being recruited by the Chinese Communist Party or Chinese state-linked institutions to work in very highly paid jobs. So that's certainly true. But I think probably the bigger question for us, and again, this is pointed out by the report, why is it that we are putting trade interests before our values consistently when it comes to China? We have been duped, we have been led down the path of economic promises. This idea that if we hitched our wagon to the Chinese economy, we were going to somehow be able to rescue the UK's economy has proven...
This was the George Osborne vision, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the Osborne vision is clinging on to its death by its fingernails. That's really put us in a difficult position with China when it comes to Beijing's behaviour. And we find ourselves now, instead of having woken up to this, actually walking back. We've had the high watermark already during the Johnson premiership, believe it or not, of standing up to China. And we seem to be rowing back on that now. And that's really worrying, as the report points out.
Well, I think the potential corruptibility of our ruling classes is a very big factor. I noticed myself, actually, many of the people who were happy to sell us to Brussels are now equally happy to sell us to China, but that's a separate point. But what does interest me, Luke, is this. When you go out into the country, the real country, and you poll attitudes on the Chinese Communist Party, what's happened to the Uyghurs, all these things, you will find a public that really are beginning to wake up to this problem in quite a fundamental way. Poll after poll showing us great concern about the threat that China poses to us, and yet we still go on buying Chinese products, but it's quite difficult, isn't it? You order something online, it doesn't tell you when you buy it whether it's made in China. It's quite difficult to avoid it. But here's the thing. So the public mood is changing. Trump, when he was president, talked a lot on this issue, and I think, you know, whether you like him or not, did raise the level of debate on it. But here's the big question. Whenever this China issue comes up, Ian Duncan Smith gets up and talks about it. One or two others do the same. They found themselves now being banned from visiting Hong Kong or China. Their families banned too. Why, oh why, Luke de Pulford, are there so few members of Parliament talking about this?
Well, I want to make you feel a bit better about that, because the report that was issued today was a parliamentary report, and I think it represents the consensus of Parliament. There are very few people who still want uncritical engagement. There's a tiny little corner of Parliament now. They are obsolete, those guys. It's not so much hawks and doves, it's realists and wishful thinkers. And MPs don't want to be the wishful thinkers. But you're right. Having had these sanctions imposed on a number of politicians, the others know that that kind of thing, that sort of tit for tat, might face them if they are to stand up. Maybe they don't want to do it.
They're scared?
I think that might be the case.
OK, so you think quietly Parliament is moving in the right direction, but it's not making its voice heard?
I think there is no question that with the country, Parliament is waking up. It's just government that's way behind.
Luke de Pulford, thank you very much indeed. And it is, folks, as I say, a very, very important story. In a moment, we'll talk about protests that took place down in Llanelli yesterday and in Dorset. Objections happening at Dorset Council about a barge that's due to go into the docks there. All of that in a couple of minutes.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, it's been pretty tricky for me for the last 2 or 3 weeks with this whole banking fiasco. I've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get other bank accounts and completely and utterly failing. I've also been broadcasting about it, writing about it. I've learned so much, and I have to tell you, it needs to be an absolute right for everybody in this country, is it should be entitled to having a bank account and a business bank account, because it's even harder to open and keep open business accounts. Now the banks are acting as a drag on the British economy. But you've got to knock me down with a feather when this morning, opening the Daily Mail, there it was, in the centre page, a big article from the guy that set up the Bank of Dave. Whatever you think of Farage, he has the right to an account. He should talk to the Bank of Dave. We're moneylenders, not free speech police. And it's a great piece by Dave Fishwick, who set up the Burnley Savings. Well, it's not really a bank, but it's a great piece just describing how mad the banks have gone, how politically correct the banks have become. And he says, look, we're a community bank up here in Burnley. You can save money from us, you can borrow money from us. And he said he would sit down and have a chat with me. And Dave, you're the first person in the entirety of the British financial establishment that has come forward and made that offer. I haven't seen the film yet, Bank of Dave. I am now going to. I understand there's going to be a Netflix follow-up as well. So the guy's quite a character, but the authorities did refuse him a full banking licence. So quite what we can do, I don't know. The other What the Farage moment, this is amazing. So the COVID inquiry want Boris Johnson's WhatsApp messages from the start of the pandemic right through until May 2021. That covers the period of all 3 lockdowns. Now, he changed his phone in May 2021 when he was advised that his number had been out in the public domain for the last 15 years or so. But they can't get the WhatsApp messages back. Do you know why? Well, it's very simple. He can't remember the password. Now, you know, you can make your own mind up on that. Either you think Johnson's not telling the truth, or you think his life is so completely chaotic and all over the place that genuinely he can't remember. He said he can't with 100% certainty say what the password is, and the danger is, if he gets it wrong, all of those messages would be deleted. How very, very convenient. Now, Leslie has been in the news a lot this week, and a little village on the outskirts called Furness, because that is where the Stradley Park Hotel and Spa is. And goodness me, there have been some very big local protests about this great hotel, very well known to the people of Llanelli. 95 people employed at it. Well, there were 95 people, but they've all now been fired, because this is now to become a migrant hotel. Roadblocks have been put in place, the council have got involved, and it seems that maybe the protesters are beginning to win. Last night, large numbers of people turned up to protest. At the moment, perhaps they may even be winning. I don't know. I'm joined by Robert Lloyd from the Furness Action Committee, and that's the protest group around Llanelli. It was a very big turnout last night. But there were 1 or 2 people detained by the police, I understand.
Last night, no. In fact, there were incidents there on Sunday night when there were 4 arrests. But to be fair to everybody there, they've been really well behaved and very civil and very respectful of all activity there. There's a large presence at the hotel tonight again, about 100 people. Oddly enough, we've just seen a young couple from France turn up for what they thought was a romantic break in West Wales, and only to find, of course, the hotel is shut. Yeah. And it was closed last week, and it's a tragedy for the town of Llanelli and the village of Furness.
Yeah, I mean, 95 people, half of them full-time, half of them part-time, but, you know, that's a lot of people, isn't it? You know, whose money would be going into the local community. I also understand that, Robert, that it was a favourite place for sort of birthday teas, weddings, and all of that's gone too.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, everybody has had a life event at the Stradley Park Hotel in Llanelli, because you've either been there for weddings or birthday celebrations, Sunday lunches, or dinners or funeral wakes. So everybody has been connected to the place. And people in Llanelli and the wider West Wales community have supported this hotel down the years. It's a 4-star hotel which offers quality bedroom accommodation, and it's in a lovely spot. And it represents more than 50% of Llanelli's quality bedrooms for hospitality purposes. So what has happened is that we've lost that tourism potential and tourism capacity in one fell swoop, all for a totally balmy and bonkers plan to turn the place into a home for asylum seekers who are having their applications heard.
Yeah, and I understand, Robert, that the road leading to the hotel is a private road, which is why sort of concrete blocks have been put in place. It sounds almost like there's a siege there at the moment.
Yeah, it's a bit like man in the barricades, in Les Miserables, but people are well behaved there. I mean, we've been working on this now for 7 weeks, basically, and it's a great example of a community in action, a community gathering together to challenge the sort of the dogma of the Home Office and what they're trying to do here. The Home Office is trying to steamroller something through, and we're the little guys fighting against it. We've had 5 boulders which have appeared at the entrance. That appeared early on in the protest, and we've nicknamed the Rolling Stones, actually. And but what we've also had is gates that have been set up primarily to protect privately owned land at the entrance of the hotel, because this is the one thing which we've discovered, that the Home Office and Clear Springs Ready Homes, who will be operating this site, and the owners of the hotel, Sterling Woodrow, they fail to realise that the big flaw in this plan is they don't actually own the land which leads from the car park entrance to the main road and lets people out. So, quite reasonably, we've taken that. We've local landowners are protecting their rights. Also, what we've done to protesters, we're manning the rear entrance to the hotel 24 hours. The side entrance, which has become a subject of what is called locally hedge gate, because there's a gap in the hedge where they've been using to transport materials through security guards and Clear Springs Ready Homes and so on. So we effectively, there is a blockade of the site. Now, security people and Clear Springs staff left there peacefully last night. They opened the gates. The protesters opened the gates to let them out, and they departed quite peacefully. And frankly, we hope we never see them again. The reality
it sounds to me, Robert Lloyd, it sounds to me like you've got your tail wagging a bit. It sounds to me like you think you can win this.
Well, yeah, I mean, last night, losing the security staff and so on, it was a partial victory. We know that we're up against it. We're 0-1 down in the game, so to speak. We always were from the start, because the Home Office, Clear Springs and Sterling Woodrow had entered into this deal. So once they'd entered into that deal, we were always going to be 1-0 behind. Now, we've recovered a little bit. We're sort of into the second half of the game, and it's going to get really interesting. We've had one hearing in the High Court. We hope to get another hearing in the High Court in October. But between then and now, we're obviously hoping to stop this place being used for asylum seekers. I have to say it's a great example of a community coming together and a community campaign working. This is people power in action.
I have to say it's a fascinating case. Robert, thank you for joining us tonight here on GB News. Well, this is happening, as I said at the start of the programme, all over the country. In a moment, we head to Mid-Dorset, where a council meeting is taking place and some very serious questions are being asked about the idea to put a barge in the docks at Portland. All of that and more in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
The migrant barge, the Bibi Stockholm, is due to arrive in Portland docks tomorrow. It will take 500 young men. There is considerable disquiet in Portland and indeed in the county of Dorset. And tonight, the council is meeting in Dorchester. They're being accused of lying to residents. Jeff Moody, GB News reporter, is there in Dorchester right now as this meeting goes on. Jeff, what's happening?
I am indeed. Well, as you say, the Bibi Stockholm is still in Falmouth. We think it's going to be on the move tomorrow, but it'll take around 20 hours, Nigel, to travel the 100 nautical miles from Falmouth to Portland. The council meeting is still in progress. We've seen 2 campaign groups outside, and inside that meeting, there have been 2 proposals put forward to stop the barge from coming here. Well, I spoke earlier on to Councillor Louis O'Leary, who put forward one of those 2 motions. This is what he had to tell me earlier on.
Alongside my colleague, Councillor Tony Farage, we're putting forward a motion to request that the barge that is not yet to arrive, but we believe is imminent, to be removed as quickly as possible, as we don't feel it's an appropriate location to have it on Portland Port, and it shouldn't be sited within this county.
Why do you think it shouldn't be here?
Because to have 500 people put here when we're already struggling to provide certain services as it is, with a number of issues around infrastructure, housing and those sorts of things, it's going to create an awful lot of tension, I think, and that's what concerns me.
Well, one of the 2 campaign groups has joined me outside to talk to me about what actually happened in the meeting. Alex, you're the main organiser for No to the Barge. How has the meeting been going?
Well, so we learned 2 things today, Jeff. One, that Dorset Council clearly do not have the confidence to stand by their morals in this regard. And we also learned the name of the barrister that they employed in this. Now, this idea of planning permission stopping at the sea is something that we need to start thinking about analysing and really talking to legal advisors on this regard. And that is going to be the next step in our campaign.
You say next step, but the barge is going to come here. It's on its way, we think, tomorrow. What happens to your No to the Barge campaign when it arrives?
So there are three elements to that one. As I shared, the legal side. We're going to start looking into, again, holding our publicly elected representatives accountable. This will also be on through a barrister, through a solicitor, understanding the maritime issues here, and also looking to be there when the cruise liners appear, because we're going to show them what this private port has done, which is inhumane for both the people of Portland, Weymouth and Dorset.
Kate, talking about the cruise liners, we were hearing that the protests that happened in Portland Port on Saturday prevented a cruise liner from coming into Portland Port, and people have been complaining that there's been a significant loss of income in Weymouth and Portland because the cruise passengers haven't been able to come off. Is that true, do you think?
I absolutely beg to differ there. So cruise ships don't come in overly often. Weymouth is actually packed at the moment, and most of the cruise passengers go off in coaches outside of Weymouth. They go to Stonehenge, they go to Salisbury, they go to various places of interest. Basically, if Portland Port hadn't agreed to moor the barge, there would be no protest. They are the only ones to blame here. They are absolutely incredulous to this. They have treated the community with absolute contempt. Their silence is absolutely deafening. Bill Reeves, I call you out. Come and speak to us. What are you doing? The vulgar disparity, the way they are earning money. You've got your cruise liners, your luxury passengers, you know, on a luxury ship, and then a few hundred feet away, you have 500 men, vulnerable men, on a barge that was designed for less than half that. That is not going to mix. So you need to make your choice, Bill Reeves.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Well, I did ask Bill Reeves, the CEO of Portland Port, to talk to us, but he didn't want to talk to us today. Back to you, Nigel.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeff. Well, you can see all around the country that anger, genuine anger, is building. Now, the Home Office have said today delivering accommodation on surplus military sites will end the use of expensive hotels to house those arriving in small boats. We continue to work closely with local authorities to address the local community's concerns. Well, there you are. That solves it all. We're dealing here, of course, with the symptoms, but not the cause. The cause is large numbers of people crossing the Mediterranean, coming into Europe, some staying there, some, of course, coming on to the United Kingdom. But one man has put a bit of thought into maybe how we can stop people from coming. His name is Faisal Al-Mutar, an Iraqi refugee who was granted asylum in America and the founder of a non-profit refugee group, Ideas Beyond Borders. And he joins me from Memphis, Tennessee. Faisal, good evening. I know you've been putting some thinking into what we can do to try and stop people from leaving these countries. So please, share some of that with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm here in Memphis talking to you from Freedom Fest, which is one of the organizations that try to bring a lot of people who believe in the ideas of liberty and others together. One of the main articles, one of my work is really focused on how to prevent refugee crisis from happening in the first place and how to work within these issues, the challenges of the refugees within the region, not outside the region. And what we have seen, even based on data, is that many of the people who are leaving Syria, leaving Iraq and many other places, they mostly like to stay within these places. They like to stay around these places based upon data. And Turkey, to some extent, have been one taking a lot of these refugees. However, what I think has been lacking is that there isn't many job opportunities for many of these refugees. So what we have worked on with a lot of local partners inside Turkey who are aiming to hire many of these refugees for them to stay there. In the case of Iraq, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which is now relatively much more stable than the rest of the country, has also been hosting a lot of people. So I think is that one of the main things is that how can we make these areas habitable enough? And I've written in my article in How to Prevent the Refugee Crisis that being a refugee and an asylum is not a human right. People have, their countries around the world have the right to accept or reject based upon what they think is appropriate for them. But I think is that as a kind of a universal value is that we have to figure out a way to empower people to stay within these countries, in which they would be less likely to want to leave those countries, and that would be working within the system. Obviously, there is a lot of challenges. I mean, many of these countries are authoritarian. Many of these countries refuse. They themselves love their people to be outside, and therefore they will claim less responsibility and less damage. So I think is that there's definitely, the work is hard, but I think it's definitely doable, and that's really my last mission, the ideas beyond borders and others. Yeah.
These are all very positive arguments that you're making. But Turkey, you mentioned Turkey. Huge numbers of refugees are living in Turkey. They've come into Turkey from Syria and other places, and the European Union have been bribing Turkey with money to try and stop them crossing the Mediterranean, although we're told the Italians are expecting 400,000 to land on their shores this year. Are Turkey happy for those people to stay and work in Turkey?
So it depends. I mean, there is some divisions. The opposition, which recently lost in the elections, have really said a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric or anti-Syrian refugee immigrant rhetoric. The Erdogan government, and I not consider myself a fan of that government, is generally tends to be more pro-refugee than others. But I think what's happening in Turkey, because of the policies that Erdogan has pursued economically, which most of them have failed, to some extent has created a lot of resentment within the local Turkish population against those refugees. But I think that being said, I think the situation definitely can be contained. In fact, and the data that you're talking about when it comes to Italy, these are mostly, I believe, coming from Northern Africa and Africa in general. They're less likely to come from.
Yeah, I accept that. I accept that. I was just talking about sheer numbers. Faisal, a pleasure to have you on the show and talk to you, and we'll talk to you again, and thank you. Well, nice to hear somebody talking positively about what can be done to stop people from leaving. And just a thought on this. In 2012, when David Cameron and, of course, the French president and the American president decided to launch their war on Libya, which I thought was utterly moronic, Colonel Gaddafi, and I'm not a fan of his, Colonel Gaddafi warned us, get rid of me and millions will cross the Mediterranean. He was right, we were wrong. I'm joined by Jacob Rees-Mogg on what I think has been quite a good day, in that we've been through so many strikes over the course of the last couple of years. Do you think these pay deals for the public sector are between 5% and 7%? To me, it feels about right.
It feels about right. Pay always has to catch up when you have an inflationary period. Yeah. It's usually a bit delayed until you get back up to the full inflationary amount to maintain nominal wages. I think the government's agreed something sensible, but crucially, it's demanding productivity increases, because actually productivity in the public sector since 1997 has declined, and we can't afford that.
How will it be enforced?
Well, government departments have budgets, and the Treasury says to them, this is the amount of money you've got. You have to operate within that amount of money, and you've got to cut your coat according to your cloth. And departments will go back and ask for extra money and so on and so forth. But if the Treasury is robust, that is how it works.
Interesting. Well, I felt today was a slight step forward. Clearly, junior doctors not yet convinced, but
everybody else is.
But I mean, the teachers are, and no, it's a much better day. Jacob, what are you covering?
Well, that's what I'm covering. That is, you set me up perfectly. That is going to be the main topic of conversation that we're talking about to start with, about the strikes, the ending of the strikes, and the need for increased productivity. But we've also got Finn Lau coming on, who is going to be a guest at the end of the programme. It's one of these brave people from Hong Kong who the Chinese government has put a bounty on the head of. I mean, it's like something out of the Wild West.
It's terrifying. I covered China in quite a big way tonight on the show. I'm hoping that China's on the front page of every newspaper tomorrow, but I bet it won't be. I bet it'll still be Hugh Edwards. Who knows? Anyway, that's it from me. I'm back with you on Monday evening at 7 o'clock. I wish you all a very good weekend. Up next, have a look at the weather, please.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name is Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been a slightly less unsettled day through Thursday, but things are becoming more unsettled as we go towards Friday, with this area of low pressure pushing up towards the UK as we go through tonight and into Friday. So looking at the detail for this evening then, some clear spells for eastern areas at first, but cloud will start to push in from the west as we go into the start of Friday, as well as some pretty heavy rain, especially for southwestern areas. And with this, combined with some stronger winds, temperatures will be staying around the low teens for tonight. As we go through Friday, a pretty wet and windy day to come with a yellow wind warning in force for parts of southwest England and Wales. Heavy rain as well, pushing northeastwards throughout the day. Driest for longest across northeastern parts of Scotland. But with all that cloud and those strong winds around, temperatures will be feeling pretty low for the time of year, so highs of around 22 in the southeast. Now that rain will clear to the north of Scotland through the start of Saturday, but swiftly followed by some heavy showers and thunderstorms, as well as further strong winds, but this time for central, southern and eastern parts of England. And remaining unsettled as we go through the second half of the weekend and into the start of the new week, with temperatures at or below average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.